Wondering what to do when kids' tantrums or meltdowns turn physical. I'm talking throwing blocks, kicking the door, kicking you, hurting themselves, hurting like the property and things around them, siblings, friends, etc., which is exactly what we're looking at today. How to contain the physical moments to steer our child back to safety. After all, one of our number one jobs as parents is to ensure and create safety for our child. If you guys are new here, my name is Rachel from The Confused Mom. Welcome to my channel. I share baby and toddler product reviews, activities, as well as Montessori at-home tips. Before becoming a full-time YouTuber and blogger, I earned my master's degree in counseling and worked for over a decade in various settings, everything from working in ABA, applied behavior analysis, with children on the spectrum, to substance abuse and co-occurring mental health disorders of all ages. So pretty wide variety of people I've worked with and things I've seen from both the child level as well as how that ends up impacting people through the adult years. For more on my background, head back to the first video in this little emotion series I'm doing and be sure to check it out. And in this video, we're looking at 3 forms of containment to ensure and create safety for our kids: verbal, environmental, and physical. One thing I want you to keep in mind as you work with your kid on this is that you're not looking for cessation of the behavior, meaning you're not looking for the behavior to necessarily go away completely, especially not right away. What I really want you to focus on is how long their recovery time is after you implement these things, because if they've been hitting, kicking, biting, things like that, one time of doing this is not going to stop them from doing it forever. In my first video of this series where I talk about like what are tantrums and meltdowns, I talk about the polyvagal theories. That recovery time is what I want you to look at as a measurement of success, that you're on the right path with this. First part of this is going to be verbal containment, and I want to talk about name it to tame it, which is a pretty popular intervention tool out there for parents. Name it to tame it essentially creates a sense of order for kids by demystifying the big emotions and giving them a name so they can kind of like organize them in their head and in their body. In a sense, it's giving them a verbal container for what they're experiencing. But here's the thing though, in my last video I said we were gonna get into this a little bit more. Adults themselves actually have a pretty hard time naming emotion. So if that's you, don't feel bad. I'm going to teach you a little hack based off of a Montessori principle for making this a lot simpler. So in Montessori, when teaching the alphabet, you start with just like a certain set of letters. So C, M, A, T, some of the more commonly used ones, if you will, so that it becomes a lot easier for your kid to learn the alphabet, read, write, all that. Builds up their confidence momentum. And we're going to take that same idea here of working with a small subset and apply it to our child's emotions. So in the world of emotions, we have something called primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are the feelings that are hardwired into us as human beings across all cultures. This has been studied for decades and decades. Now, I will say some psychologists and psychiatrists out there think there's only 5, so you can choose whichever you feel most comfortable with. The 5 core ones are going to be anger, fear, sadness, disgust, and joy, and then the other 3 that there's some debate on are interest, surprise, and shame. I forgot to say why this is important. And that is because a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists have been interviewed, and even teachers, where our toddlers actually only know happy, mad, and sad. By using this 5 or 8 primary emotion structure, we make sure we are giving them a well-rounded vocabulary to communicate their internal world. All right, let's jump back in. Now, of course, some of those words don't feel the most natural. Like in our family, we don't run around saying, "Oh, you look joyful today." Instead, we say, "Hey, I'm feeling happy right now." Most people don't run around saying, "Oh, I feel interested today." Instead, we say things like loved, friendly, accepted. So obviously, within each of those 8 emotions, there are tons of variations. Sit down with your partner, come up with your core 8, put those on the fridge, and use that for daily check-ins. Start your morning with it. At the dinner table each night, everyone go around and identify their 8 to start to give a verbal container to what is happening inside of our children. So the secondary emotions piece of this, what a secondary emotion is basically the learned response to a feeling. So for instance, your child gets upset because their sibling takes the toy from them, but then you say, "Oh, just let them have it." They may start to associate shame or embarrassment with their anger because it wasn't the right feeling to have in that moment. So this is kind of where I say adults sometimes have a hard time reading things because our emotions have been a little bit muddied. And then the last little part of verbal containment I want to touch on is just narrating and modeling it within yourself. Like in those nitty-gritty moments too, where you may be crying or angry in front of your child. Own that. Mommy is crying because mommy feels sad right now. This is a big feeling, but mommy can handle it. You are safe and I am safe. I think sometimes our kids can get really freaked out if they see us crying and then we don't talk about it with them, but it's also really important to talk about it with them in an age-appropriate way where we're not surrogating them in as our partner or friend and giving them too many details. So that's kind of like a really simple formula, is just, this is what's happening, my behavior, this is the feeling behind that behavior. I can handle this, I'm safe, you're safe. And that can end up becoming part of their internal dialogue and a mantra to keep them sturdy through big emotions, which I think we could all use that sometimes. At least I know I can. The next part of this is environmental containment. And this is when your child is starting to get really big, maybe throwing things, maybe like just starting to lash out. And we are going to literally move them into a smaller environment. So if they're at the park, maybe we bring them into our car or sit underneath the slide. If they are in like a playroom, maybe we bring them into their bedroom. If they're in their bedroom, maybe we bring them into their bathroom or fort. Literally put a physical container around what they're feeling so it's not able to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, feeling like it's destroying anything in their path. Ideally, this environment that you move them to is safety proofed, if you will, so that way you don't have to move on to actually physically containing themselves, because there's very few things in this area for them to hurt themselves or others with. Generally speaking, being in just a smaller room and you sitting with them and maintaining your calmness is going to help them complete the stress cycle and that they're not out of control. So that's what the smaller environment can do. Now, if that smaller environment doesn't work, you may need to move on to physical containment. Physical containment is different than restraint. Restraint has literally killed children and is something that like I don't recommend. So the difference here, I would equate it to like swaddling a baby. So you know where we pin the arms down, wrap the baby up like a burrito. Oh, look how cute they are. But the child is actually restrained in that hold, versus the types of swaddles where their arms are up and they can kind of push out and wiggle stuff around. It's much looser, where their moral reflex is just settled versus stopped completely. And that is the difference, like visual, I want you to hold in your head here. Think of it as putting on a sweater and not a straitjacket. When I say physical containment, what I mean is if your child came at you with full force, they could probably break through. And we're really just being their weighted blanket. That hug that kind of creates a pause in their behavior so that they can realize like, oh wait, what am I doing? That's where I want us to be at. Not that we are holding them in some sort of like aggressive hold and further traumatizing them or terrorizing them. Now, when it does come to actually physically containing them, I like to hold them in what, I don't know if other people call it this, but what I call a child-led way. And basically what that means is if they're kicking and hitting, you may need to start off with a bear hug just to create that pause in their actual behavior so they can think it through, so that they can come back to the moment. If that doesn't work, I would move towards laying on them. The way I like to do this is they lay down and like a starfish and your head is on their belly. So there's really no way that you're actually going to be hurting them, and your hands are just kind of on their forearms as a gentle guide. Now, obviously in this pose, if your child is bigger than you, they could still kick you in the back and hurt you. That's why I say this is a very gentle way of doing it. And then my personal favorite is to cradle them like a baby. So you're actually picking them up and holding them like a baby. Now, before going into a physical containment, you need to narrate what is happening. It's my job to keep everyone, including you, safe. I can't let you hit, so I'm going to hold you right now. You are upset, but you are safe. I can handle this. You are a good kid having a hard time right now. Obviously, like you can go ahead and go into a little bit more of the detail about how you're going to hold them. I'm moving my arms around you. I'm going to pick you up. So you can obviously make it specific to what you are doing. You have to move swiftly. You have to move confidently. And at the end of the day, no matter how you choose to hold your child in that moment, it is very, very normal, and even likely the first few times you do this will kick up some big feelings for you. Ideally, you're not adding more chaos into the environment by feeling emotionally dysregulated yourself. So like what I mean by that is, because I know that's kind of messy, what I mean by that is if when you go to hold them, you feel very unsafe and like your heart's pounding out of your chest and you're clearly having like a dysregulated nervous system response, you may want to stop holding them as soon as the safety threat has ended. You don't want to prolong that hold where you're putting your dysregulated energy into them, because so often kids end up tuning their nervous system to the primary caregivers around them. So if you're feeling unsafe in holding them, like you may add more feelings of unsafe to the situation, is what I'm trying to say here. So once that safety threat has ended, if that is you, you're going to want to like create a little bit of space, maybe do some tapping, maybe do some different like midline crosses to bring yourself down, talk to yourself about what the reality of this situation is. So like, you're having a big feeling right now, you are safe, I am holding you, and just keep kind of grounding into the actual reality of the experience so that you're not feeling that chaos. In my experience, physical containment does not work in bringing our children down if we are having that sort of like negative nervous system response. And that is really one of the only times it doesn't work, or if we're like forcing restraint on them without realizing it and causing them to move more into collapse, that dorsal vagal response. But when you are using gentle pressure, when you are talking to them, when you feel calm and confident about what you're doing, it typically brings things down very, very quickly. One of the big things I see today, and I've talked to other moms about, is this major push in our generation of parents for consent. We live in a culture of consent today, which is great, but when it comes to our toddlers and preschoolers and young kids, or just kids out of control, we can't pause to ask for consent. This is a safety issue at that point. When our toddler is out of control, asking them for a hug because we know it'll help them complete the stress cycle is not the thing to do at that moment. You're essentially taking a child who already feels out of control and giving them more control, which is like the last thing they need in that moment. They need you to come in and show them the light at the end of the tunnel. They need you to come in and take charge and lead them back to safety. In asking them, can I move you to another room? Can I hold you right now? These kind of passive requests that are guised as consent requests, what you're really communicating to them is their feelings are so big and scary to you right now that you're unsure how to handle them. And kind of on that same note of consent culture and things like that, just something to sit with. When I hear adults don't like to be touched, what that tells me is there is some sort of unintegrated trauma in their life. We as human beings are hardwired for touch. Hugging for like 20 seconds, research has shown, releases oxytocin. It is one of the best ways to complete the stress cycle. So like, we are hardwired for touch. And when we get to adults that don't like touch, what that tells me is they just have such a history of dysregulation that they have set that up as a boundary to create safety for themselves because they haven't known how to create it in any other way to this point. So obviously we want to avoid that in our kids. So again, consent culture, it's great. It has a time and a place, but it is not black and white, and we cannot wait for consent when we are in meltdown. We need to show them that their big, scary, out of control isn't as scary as it seems, that we can handle it and we know the way out. Again, kind of tying this back to secondary emotions, in order for them to not feel shame about these really big feelings coming out, they need to know that you can handle it, that they're not scaring you, and there's no reason for them to hide that part of themselves. And sometimes one of the best ways to do that is to hold them through it. I mean, just think about it. If you've ever really broken down, and I mean really broken down, like couldn't sit upright, maybe couldn't even walk for yourself, if somebody came over and offered to help you, your initial reaction, oh no, get off me, get off me, get off me, get off me. And it's not necessarily because you don't want that support, but there is a layer of feeling like you don't deserve it in that moment. Like you're such a wild animal yourself that you're just unsafe and not worthy of any of it. And obviously that's not true for all situations and all panic attacks and all offerings of help, but there is an element of truth to that, and we want to avoid instilling that truth in our kids. And that's kind of where we shift into distinguishing safety. I have heard through the years of being a mom this great debate about distinguishing safety in our toddlers when they're upset. It typically sounds like, how can I tell my toddler they're safe when they're clearly having a meltdown and feel unsafe? And that is the key word. They feel unsafe, not that they are unsafe. And that distinction is really what we need to instill in our children. To label our kids' feelings as unsafe is a recipe for setting them up for a lot of struggles in life. And that's where narrating the reality of the situation comes in handy. This feels unsafe right now, but I am here with you. We are in your bedroom. You are safe. You're having a hard time right now. I'm here with you. I won't let anything happen to you. I find for physical containment to be the most effective, ideally you're really letting the child lead that. So what that can look like is when first starting out, you go to lay on them and they say, "You're hurting me, get off, get off, get off." You can say something like, "I know this is uncomfortable for you. I cannot let you hurt yourself. I'm going to hold you until you use your hands gently. Are you ready for that now?" And if they go back to the destructive behavior, you go ahead and rehold them. Or you could say something along the lines, "I hear this is uncomfortable for you right now. I still need to hold you, so I'm going to switch positions." Don't drop into dorsal vagal yourself, essentially, and work with them in finding what is comfortable. If they're actually talking to you and able to say those things, that's a good sign that they're actually coming down. So we want to work with them on that. Because remember, when we go into our freeze response, we wouldn't be able to communicate like that. And as you do this more often with your kid, you actually may be able to, in that initial narrating process where you say, "I'm going to hold you now," you may be able to eventually work up to a place where you ask them, "I'm going to hold you now. Do you want me to lay on you or hold you like a baby?" That's that crib hold I like. And so they can kind of be a part of it, because after you do this a couple times, they will reach for this type of containment when feeling extremely dysregulated. And it does become a beautiful thing, unlike restraint. So it is about talking to them and working with their senses and not dominating them. And when you go to release them, especially if they've asked, just pause for like 10-15 seconds, say, "I'm gonna let you go now," and then just kind of take a deep breath and then go into letting go. Hopefully when you do let them go, that pause in itself has been long enough where they don't go back to destructive behaviors. I feel like there's a million more things I could say on this topic, but I seriously hope it was helpful. I know containment is a very taboo topic, not often talked about, especially physical containment, and I hope that kind of demystifies it, gives you some tools that actually are helpful and not hurtful in your relationships. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend who might find it helpful. Keep in mind what I said about the recovery time and not the cessation of the behavior as a measurement for whether or not this is working for you. Make sure to also hit that subscribe and notification bell, because in my next video, I'm actually going to teach you guys how to play with your children to process their emotions, which is really helpful for repairing the relationship if containment went sideways, if you got angry at all during a tantrum and all that good stuff. It's going to be really, really beneficial. Be sure to go back, check out those previous videos in this series. And as always, my name's Rachel. Have a good one.